The quiet Barristaith coffee shop on Maple Street had become my sanctuary, a place where the familiar routine of ordering the same drink helped anchor my chaotic life. As a freelance web developer, every morning at 7:30, I'd walk through those glass doors, laptop bag slung over my shoulder, ready to claim my usual corner table. She was always there first. Violet, that's what her name tag read, though I'd never heard her speak. Tall and graceful with midnight black hair pulled into a messy bun. She moved behind the espresso machine like a dancer. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held secrets I couldn't fathom. What struck me most wasn't her beauty, though she was undeniably stunning. It was her silence. In 3 months of daily visits, I'd never heard her voice. She communicated through gestures, written notes on coffee cups, and expressions that somehow conveyed more than most people's conversations. The usual Jack, her colleague Emma would ask, while Violet worked silently beside her, creating intricate latte art that customers photographed before drinking. I'd nod, stealing glances at Violet as she crafted my cappuccino with the precision of a surgeon. She never looked directly at me, but I sometimes caught her watching my reflection in the espresso machine's chrome surface. One Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was struggling with a particularly difficult website redesign, cursing under my breath at code that refused to cooperate. In my frustration, I pushed up my sleeves and ran my hands through my hair, a nervous habit I'd carried since childhood. That's when Violet saw it. The scar on my left forearm, a jagged crescent moon that I'd carried for as long as I could remember. My adoptive parents had told me it came from a playground accident when I was 5, back before they found me wandering the streets of downtown Portland, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. Violet dropped the milk steamer. The crash echoed through the morning coffee chatter, causing heads to turn. But her eyes were locked on my exposed arm, her face pale as fresh snow. Jack, she whispered. The name fell from her lips like a prayer, like recognition, like coming home. It was the first word I'd ever heard her speak, and it sent electricity shooting down my spine. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" I asked, standing so quickly my chair scraped against the tile floor. She shook her head, but her storm cloud eyes never left my scar. Her hands trembled as she reached for her apron strings, untying them with urgent fingers. I have to," she struggled, with words as if they were foreign objects in her mouth. "The scar, when did you get it?" "I was 5. Playground accident, according to my parents." I rolled down my sleeve, suddenly self-conscious. "Why?" Instead of answering, she rolled up her own sleeve, revealing a matching scar on her right forearm. Not identical, but eerily similar. Another crescent moon, but inverted, as if our scars were two halves of the same whole. The coffee shop fell silent around us. Emma stared with her mouth open. Regular customers paused mid-conversation to watch this unprecedented moment of Violet speaking. "I got mine when I was 5 too," she said, voice growing stronger with each word. "But I wasn't on a playground. I was running from something terrible." My head began to pound, a familiar ache that had plagued me since childhood whenever I tried to remember those early years. But this time, instead of the usual blank wall, I glimpsed fragments. A little girl with dark hair and storm-colored eyes, holding my hand as we ran through smoke and chaos. "This is crazy," I breathed. "You're saying we knew each other when we were kids?" "I'm saying," Violet stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper, "that I've been looking for you for 20 years. And every night, I dream about the boy who saved my life." The words hit me like a physical blow, because suddenly, impossibly, I remembered dreaming too. Dreams of a girl who needed saving. Dreams that felt too real to be mere imagination. "Who are you?" I asked. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her in 3 months of morning coffee rituals. "Someone who's been waiting for you to remember." Fragments of the past. Violet closed the coffee shop early that day, hanging a hastily scrawled family emergency sign on the door. We sat across from each other at my usual table, the familiar morning rush replaced by an electric silence that seemed to hum with possibility. "My real name isn't Violet," she began, her fingers tracing the rim of her untouched coffee cup. "It's Ivy Chen. I took the name Violet when I aged out of foster care, trying to leave the past behind. And did you leave it behind? She laughed. But there was no humor in it. You can't leave behind something that's carved into your soul. Believe me, I tried. I studied her face, searching for recognition. The harder I looked, the more my head throbbed with that familiar ache. Tell me about the dreams. Every night for 20 years. Same dream, different variations. Her voice grew distant. A warehouse fire. Smoke so thick you can't breathe. And a boy, blonde hair, green eyes, maybe 6 years old, grabbing my hand and leading me through the maze of burning boxes to safety. The words triggered something deep in my memory. Not a complete picture, but sensations: the smell of burning, wood and melted plastic, the weight of a small hand in mine, the sound of sirens growing closer. The boy always has a scar, she continued, her eyes fixed on my covered forearm, shaped like a crescent moon. And just before I wake up, he always says the same thing. What does he say? Promise me you'll remember. Promise me you'll find me when we're grown up. I felt the blood drain from my face because I knew those words. They'd been echoing in my own dreams for 2 decades, spoken in a voice I couldn't place to a girl whose face remained frustratingly blurred. The warehouse, I said slowly. It was on the east side of town, near the river, you remember. Pieces, fragments. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to organize the scattered images flooding my mind. There were other kids there. Not supposed to be. It was some kind of shelter, unofficial. A place for kids who fell through the cracks, Ivy confirmed. Runaways, orphans, kids whose parents couldn't or wouldn't care for them. Mrs. Patterson ran it out of the old textile warehouse. Technically illegal, but she fed us and kept us safe until the fire. Until the fire. Her voice cracked slightly. They said it was electrical, but I remember Mrs. Patterson shouting about someone coming, about how we had to hide. Then everything went to hell. I closed my eyes, letting the memories surface like photographs developing in slow motion. You were new, scared. You'd only been there a few days. You were the only one who was kind to me. The other kids, they didn't trust newcomers, but you shared your food. Let me sleep near you where it was warmer. And when the fire started, you came back for me. I was trapped in the storage room where the littlest kids slept. The door was jammed, smoke was filling the space, and I thought I was going to die. Tears began streaming down her face, but you came back. You pried that door open with a piece of metal pipe, cut your arm doing it. The scar on my forearm began to tingle, as if responding to the memory. You were so scared. I told you to hold my hand, that I wouldn't let go, and you didn't, even when the ceiling started collapsing. Even when the smoke was so thick we were crawling blind toward the exit, you held my hand and guided me out. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of recovered memory settling between us like a bridge finally rebuilt. After 20 years of separation. What happened after? I asked. Why don't I remember anything else? We got separated at the hospital. Different foster families, different systems. I tried to find you, but she shrugged helplessly. They said it was better for trauma recovery if we didn't have contact with other survivors. Fresh start, clean slate. But you never forgot. How could I? You saved my life. And more than that, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. I think even at 6 years old, I knew I loved you. The words hung in the air between us, honest and vulnerable and completely unexpected. But as I looked into her storm-colored eyes, I realized the truth of it. This wasn't just about recovered memory or childhood trauma. This was about finding the missing piece of my soul. I've been looking for you too, I said quietly. I just didn't know it until now. The investigation was spent the next week piecing together our shared past, meeting every evening after Violet's shifts at the coffee shop. What started as memory recovery sessions gradually evolved into something deeper, long conversations that stretched past midnight, shared meals, and a growing awareness that the connection between us transcended simple childhood friendship. I've been doing research, Violet said on Thursday night, spreading a collection of newspaper clippings across my kitchen table about the fire, about Mrs. Patterson, about what really happened that night. I leaned over her shoulder, breathing in the scent of vanilla and coffee that seemed to follow her everywhere. Being close to her felt natural, like muscle memory returning after years of disuse. "Look at this," she pointed to a headline from the Portland Tribune, dated 3 days after the fire. "Suspected arson in warehouse fire kills caregiver, displaces dozen children." Arson. I scanned the article, but you said they claimed it was electrical. That was the initial report, but the investigation revealed accelerant patterns, evidence of deliberate ignition. Her finger traced the newsprint. Someone wanted that place destroyed. But why? Mrs. Patterson was helping kids who had nowhere else to go. That's what I thought too. Until I found this. She pulled out a photocopy of what looked like a legal document. Property records show the warehouse was purchased just 2 months before the fire by Meridian Development Corporation. They wanted the land. Exactly. And Mrs. Patterson's informal shelter was standing in the way of a luxury apartment complex. Her voice carried an edge of anger I'd never heard before. 12 kids displaced, 1 woman dead, all for profit margins. I studied the documents, a cold fury building in my chest. Do you think Mrs. Patterson knew? Is that why she was shouting about someone coming? I think she got wind of their plans and tried to evacuate us. But she didn't make it out. Violet's hand found mine across the table. The official report says she died of smoke inhalation, but the coroner's notes mention blunt force trauma to the head. Jesus, you're saying they murdered her? I'm saying a lot of convenient things happened that night. Mrs. Patterson dies. The building burns completely. The kids get scattered across different foster systems, with no way to corroborate each other's stories. She met my eyes, and 20 years later, Meridian Towers stands exactly where the warehouse used to be. I thought about the gleaming high-rise that dominated the east side skyline, with its expensive condos and breathtaking river views. I'd driven past it hundreds of times, never knowing I was looking at the site of my most traumatic childhood memory. What do we do with this information? I don't know. The statute of limitations has probably run out. Most of the evidence was destroyed in the fire. And we're talking about going up against a major development corporation with unlimited legal resources. But we have our memories now, our testimony, the traumatic memories of 2 6-year-olds recovered 20 years later. Any lawyer worth their degree would tear us apart in court. She squeezed my hand. I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm just saying we need to be smart about it. There might be others, I said suddenly. Other kids from the shelter who survived. If we could find them, get their stories. I've been thinking the same thing. I found partial records from the foster care system. 7 other children were placed in homes after the fire. If they're still in the Portland area, we could try to contact them, see what they remember. Violet nodded, but her expression was troubled. There's something else, Jack, something. I haven't told you. My stomach tightened. What? I'm not the only one who's been looking for information about that night. 3 weeks ago, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was stolen, but my files about the fire were gone through. And yesterday, I noticed a car following me home from work. You think someone knows what we're doing? I think someone's been watching us since we found each other again. And I don't think they want us digging into the past. As if summoned by her words, a black sedan drove slowly past my apartment window, its tinted windows reflecting the street lights like dead eyes. Violet, I said quietly, I think you're right. Dangerous territory. The black sedan appeared 3 more times over the next 2 days. Once outside the coffee shop during Violet's morning shift, once parked across from my apartment building, and once following us as we drove to the public library to research property records. Each sighting sent ice through my veins. Confirmation that our investigation had attracted unwanted attention. We should go to the police, I said as we sat in the library's basement archive room, surrounded by dusty boxes of old city records, and tell them what? That we think a development company committed arson 20 years ago based on recovered childhood memories. They'll think we're delusional. Violet pulled another folder from the box she was searching. Besides, look at this. She handed me a manila envelope marked confidential in red ink. Inside were architectural plans for the Meridian Towers project, dated 6 months before the warehouse fire. They were planning the development long before they officially purchased the property. I observed. This proves premeditation. It proves they were confident they could acquire the land. But it doesn't prove they were willing to kill for it. She paused, studying my face. Although the fact that someone broke into my apartment to steal my research suggests we're onto something they don't want exposed. Violet, this is getting dangerous. Maybe we should— No. Her voice was firm, eyes blazing with determination. Mrs. Patterson died protecting us. I won't let her sacrifice be meaningless. Before I could respond, the lights in the archive room flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Power outage, I whispered. In just this section of the building. Unlikely. Violet was already gathering the documents, stuffing them into her bag. We need to leave. Now. We made our way through the darkened corridors toward the main exit, but the sound of footsteps echoed behind us, measured, deliberate, definitely following. My heart hammered against my ribs as we quickened our pace there. Violet pointed toward a side exit marked emergency only that leads to the parking garage. We pushed through the door, setting off an alarm that shrieked through the building. Behind us, the footsteps broke into a run. My car's on level 3, I said, grabbing Violet's hand as we sprinted up the concrete stairwell. Wait. She pulled me to a stop at the second level landing. Listen. Above us, car doors slammed, multiple vehicles' engines running. They'd anticipated our exit route. How many people are after us? I breathed. Enough to suggest this is bigger than just a development company covering up old crimes. She looked around the stairwell, calculating options. The maintenance tunnels. They connect to the steam system for the whole downtown block. How do you know that? I've been planning escape routes since someone started following me. She led me to an unmarked door that opened with surprising ease. Being paranoid has its advantages. The maintenance tunnels were narrow, hot, and filled with the constant hum of building systems. We crawled through the mechanical spaces like rats in the walls, following Violet's memorized map toward an exit 3 blocks away. Why are you so calm about this? I asked as we paused at a junction. Because I've been preparing for this moment. My entire life, she replied. Every foster home, every new school, every job, I always had an exit strategy. I always knew they might come for me eventually. They. Who's they? Whoever has enough power to make a warehouse full of children disappear from public memory. Whoever can make official records vanish and keep witnesses scattered and silent for 20 years. She met my eyes in the dim tunnel lighting. This isn't just about real estate, Jack. This is about something much bigger. We emerged from the tunnels in the basement of an office building, 6 blocks from the library. No black sedans in sight, no footsteps behind us. But the relief was temporary. We can't go back to our apartments, Violet said as we walked toward my car. They know where we live, where we work. We need to disappear for a while. I know a place my friend Marcus has. A cabin up in the mountains, off the grid, no cell service. He uses it for writing retreats. Perfect. But first, we need to contact the other survivors. If we're right about this conspiracy, they might be in danger too. As we drove out of downtown Portland, I caught a glimpse of Meridian Towers in my rearview mirror, a gleaming monument to greed and covered-up crimes. But now it represented something else too, the place where Violet and I had found each other again, and where we'd discovered that some bonds can survive any attempt to break them. Whatever happens next, I said, reaching for her hand, we face it together, together. She agreed, her fingers intertwining with mine, just like when we were 6, but this time, we weren't helpless children running from a fire. We were adults, with resources, determination, and most importantly, each other. The war for truth was just beginning. Truth and Reconciliation Mark's cabin sat on 40 acres of mountain wilderness, completely isolated from the digital world that had become our prison. For the first time in weeks, Violet and I could breathe freely, knowing that no black sedans would appear around the next corner. I found them, Violet announced on our 3rd morning at the cabin, looking up from her laptop connected to Marcus's satellite internet. 3 of the other survivors. They're all still in the Pacific Northwest. I set down my coffee and leaned over her shoulder. Are they willing to talk? More than willing. Turns out we're not the only ones who've been having dreams, Jack. And we're not the only ones who've been followed. The reunion took place at a diner in a small town outside Eugene. After 20 years, walking into that restaurant felt like traveling back in time. The faces had aged, but I recognized them instantly. Tommy Chen, who'd taught me to tie my shoes. Rebecca Martinez, who'd shared her teddy bear when I had nightmares. And David Kim, who'd been like a big brother to all the younger kids. Holy shit, Tommy said when he saw my scar. It's really you. The stories that emerged over the next 3 hours painted a picture of systematic intimidation. Spanning 2 decades, each survivor had experienced the same pattern: mysterious gaps in their childhood medical records, foster families who discouraged questions about the past, and in recent years, subtle surveillance that intensified whenever they tried to investigate. The warehouse fire. They've been keeping tabs on all of us, Rebecca said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger, making sure we stayed scattered, making sure we never compared notes. But why? David asked. What are they so afraid of? Violet spread the documents we'd gathered across the diner table. Because we witnessed something they thought they'd buried forever. And because together, we represent the only threat to a cover-up that's made them millions. So what do? Tommy leaned forward. Go to the media. File a lawsuit. Both, I said. But carefully, if we move too fast, they'll discredit us before we can get our story out. I have a contact at the Portland Tribune, Rebecca offered, investigative reporter who specializes in corporate corruption. She's been looking for a story like this for years. Over the next week, we built our case methodically. The reporter, Jana Walsh, proved to be a tireless investigator who helped us connect dots. We'd missed the Meridian Development Corporation. Wasn't just a real estate company, it was part of a larger network of businesses that specialized in urban renewal projects across the Pacific Northwest. Look at this pattern, Jana said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. Portland in 2003, Seattle in 2007, Vancouver in 2010. Every project involved displacing vulnerable populations, homeless camps, low-income housing, unofficial shelters, and in every case, there were convenient fires or accidents that cleared the way for development. How many people died? Violet asked quietly. That we can document, 17. But the real number is probably higher. The weight of that revelation settled over us like a shroud. Mrs. Patterson hadn't been their only victim. She'd been part of a systematic campaign of violence disguised as urban progress. We need more than documents, I said. We need someone on the inside willing to testify. That someone turned out to be retired Fire Marshal Robert Hayes, who'd investigated the warehouse fire and been pressured to alter his findings. 20 years of guilt had taken their toll, and he was ready to tell the truth. I knew it was arson. From day one, he told us in a recorded interview. But my supervisor got a call from someone high up in city government. Suddenly, the case was classified as accidental, and I was transferred to a different department. The story broke on a Tuesday morning with a front-page headline, Deadly Conspiracy. How corporate greed killed Portland's most vulnerable children. Within hours, it was picked up by national news outlets. The public reaction was swift and furious. Protesters gathered outside Meridian Towers demanding justice. City officials promised investigations. The FBI announced they were opening a federal case. But for me, the most important moment came 3 days after publication, when Violet and I stood outside the site of the old warehouse, now marked with a temporary memorial where people had left. Flowers and photographs of Mrs. Patterson. She would be proud, Violet said, her hand finding mine as naturally as breathing. Of the investigation, of us, of what we've built together. She turned to face me, storm-colored eyes bright with unshed tears. 20 years ago, you saved my life in that burning building. This week, you saved my soul by helping me find the truth. We saved each other, I corrected, pulling her closer. We always have. The kiss that followed tasted like justice and coffee and coming home around us. The city hummed with the energy of change, of systems being challenged and truths being revealed. 6 months later, Meridian Development Corporation filed for bankruptcy amid a flood of lawsuits. Several city officials resigned in disgrace. The warehouse site was converted into a memorial park dedicated to Mrs. Patterson and the other victims of corporate violence. Violet and I opened our own coffee shop 2 blocks away, Patterson's, place where the walls were lined with photographs of the kids she'd protected, and the story of the woman who died trying to save them. And every morning, as I watch Violet create intricate latte art for customers who've become friends, I'm reminded that some scars don't mark damage, they mark survival. They mark the places where love held us together when everything else tried to tear us apart. The boy who saved the girl in the fire had become the man who would love her for the rest of their lives. Some promises, it turns out, are worth keeping for 20 years.